know it's hard to relive that, but just wanted to give everybody who was watching a chance to see what this is all about. Officer Aaron Ambers today exonerated by LMPD Chief Erika Shields of charges of excessive force in the incident of Dee Garrett, center camera here, who was repeatedly punched in the face while face down and restrained by LMPD. Cheyenne is on camera left, and Dave Mour, attorney, is on camera right. Let's get a start with you, David, if you don't mind.
Sure.
As a representation for Dee, it's important that we hear from you first. Did you have expectations that this officer was going to be held responsible for use of excessive force? Are you surprised by the outcome of the LMPD investigation?
No, I'm not surprised at all. I had no expectation that LMPD would make a finding that he acted, in my opinion, in violation of policy, number one, and number two, in violation of state law. I think he also acted in violation of federal law. But no, this is a continued saga of allowing LMPD to police itself. They're not going to. And it's allowing the foxes to investigate the foxes that have raided the chicken house. And no, I'm not surprised. I'm disappointed, obviously, and I'm disappointed for him. But am I surprised? No.
Is there any recourse at this point? Have all options been exhausted to
as
get
far
justice
as,
in this regard?
Well, getting justice is a broad supposition. As we all know, the DOJ is in town investigating LMPD. I've spoken to the DOJ representatives on a number of occasions. I don't know who they're investigating or what they're investigating, but I have to believe that they're going to take a hard look at this incident and Aaron Ambers and the other police officers that were there. I can't believe the DOJ came to Louisville to indict charge two police officers, which has happened. And the first officer that was charged was Corey Evans, who was charged with the protester was the first weekend of protesting, had gone to his knees to surrender, had his hands in the air, and former officer Evans struck him in the back of the head with a nightstick. I don't see how that incident is any better or worse than this. I mean, this man's laying on the ground, restrained, being repeatedly punched in the face. So hopefully justice will be done in that regard by our federal laws, and Officer Ambers will be appropriately charged. Now, as far as civil justice goes, we have filed a lawsuit against Aaron Ambers and one other officer whose name escapes me right now, but it's the officer that was sitting on him, on the back of his legs, and who actually signed the complaint because Dee was criminally charged. They criminally charged him in order to cover up or deflect from their unlawful assault on him. And those charges, I might add, were dismissed with no stipulation of probable cause. So there's a civil lawsuit pending for assault and for malicious prosecution.
Dee, reflect for just a moment, if you will, and I know it's hard to relive this experience over and over again. It's been memorialized by a live streamer. Reflect on it for a moment of what it felt like to be held down, handcuffed, having your face punched, and trying to reconcile that with the fact that this particular officer who was charged with excessive force has now been exonerated of those charges.
I think about my daughter, because it ain't even about me. Like, my daughter somehow saw the video, and like, she had nightmares about it. And like, it's about my baby. Like she's terrified of the police, and like, it's not right. It's not right. And like, we talk about all this about unity and all this and that, and we wonder why people in Louisville don't trust the police, because they go on and just do what they do, but then don't take responsibility for their actions. And then we gotta live with this. Like, I gotta live with my baby. Every time she see a police or she see a police car, and she always telling me, "Daddy, the police is following us. Daddy, I'm scared they're gonna hurt you. Daddy, I'm scared they're gonna take you away from me." Like, that's what hurt about all this. That my baby got to go through this. I'm not so caught up on me. I'm caught about my baby. Like what my baby got to go through.
Cheyenne, just share with us your response to this finding, if you will, that was revealed today in a story by one of the television stations. What was your response to the news?
It's sickening. I have a pit in my stomach. I feel physically ill to know that an officer can assault you on video and not be held responsible for it, not have to take accountability for it. It's sad to watch, and it's hard to watch Dee go through this, and it's hard to watch Genesis go through this too, his daughter. Everything he said about her being scared of the police and all that is true. She has nightmares. She hates when he's not home because she's worried he's not going to come back home. It's just hard, and it's not unexpected. I mean, they killed Breonna Taylor. They killed Black people in Louisville, and don't be held responsible for it. So I'm not all the way surprised that the officer wasn't held accountable, but it is obviously still disappointing.
Tara, if I may,
Please.
This is what is so disappointing to me about my hometown, Louisville, Kentucky, and what bothers me so much. When this happened, and the videos, and there's multiple videos that were taken of this. There's 2 views from cell phone cameras in the square. There's the police officers' body cams. There's the RTC cameras, which are all around the square. But when this happened, and everyone reviewed the video in the days following this event, the chief, the mayor, and the Metro Council president, David James, who happens to be a retired Louisville police officer, LMPD officer, said what they saw is disturbing. It does not comport with LMPD training and policy. And I have not read the findings. I've seen it in the stories and heard about it. But I understand Chief Shields said that these officers she wished they'd have done it a different way, or they should have done it a different way. I would suggest they not beat the hell out of a man who's being held down on the ground by other police officers. That might be the different way. But how in the heck did they not violate policy if they're saying originally this does not comport with our training? If a police officer engages in conduct that's not in compliance with the training, how is he not in violation of policy? How is that officer not in violation of state law with regard to assault on this man? So it's par for the course here in Louisville, Kentucky. And I've called this police agency many times, and I'll call them out again. It is a terrorist organization. They terrorize, brutalize, and minimize Black people. They did it in this case. They've done it in many other cases. Breonna Taylor is probably the most shocking example of that, but this is maybe not as shocking because he's still sitting here, thank God. But this is par for the course in Louisville, Kentucky. In other cities, we see police officers held accountable for their assaults or murders of Black folks. Minneapolis has held an officer accountable, 4 officers accountable actually. I can't remember where it happened, but the officer that pulled out the taser or pulled out her weapon and claimed she thought she had her taser and killed a man, she was convicted of a crime and sentenced to the penitentiary. But in Louisville, Kentucky, we can kill Black people, we can assault Black people, we can stop Black people on the street illegally, we can search Black people illegally, beat Black people illegally. Where's the accountability in Louisville, Kentucky? There isn't any.
A comment was made on one of the live streams that if the video had not been rolling, the viewer felt that Dee possibly would have suffered far greater injuries or maybe died. How do you respond to that?
No question about it. And you want to know something else that's disturbing? I was in the square that afternoon. My daughter was there, who was illegally arrested twice by LMPD. She's one of the people that videoed it. And one of the officers saw me watching it and tried to block my view. And I'm like, what are you doing? I mean, how can you all do that? It's unfathomable that this occurs in our city, and we allow the offenders to investigate the offenders. What do we expect? I mean, this is why we are where we are in Louisville. This is why we had a year of civil unrest and protests, and the riots, if you will, were mostly precipitated by the police and engaging in activity exactly like this, attacking, beating, brutalizing, falsely charging people who were peacefully protesting. That night, or that actually was a Sunday afternoon, he was walking in Jefferson Street carrying a very large wooden cross, holding a megaphone, talking about Rosa Parks. And when they came to decide to arrest him, he wasn't even in the street anymore. He was standing up on the sidewalk, as I remember, drinking a bottle of water. And here we go.
What message do you think this sends to people who will Black people here, and just about the department saying that they want to foster trust within the community? What is the underlying message that you think this decision sends?
Well, the mantra of LMPD that we want to foster trust with the community, in particular the African American community, is a joke. It is an absolute joke. And I have no confidence in this chief. She's a throwaway from Atlanta who left Atlanta under cloud. She's under cloud here now. And the message, if I'm not a Black person and I can't speak for Black people, but as a civil rights attorney in this town who represents a lot of Black people, and I'm going to speak for you, and if I'm wrong, you tell me. The message to Black people is, we don't give a damn about you. We don't give a damn about your rights. We don't care who you are. We're going to do whatever we want to you, whenever we want, however we want to do it, and there's no accountability. And that's a scary thing to be. I mean, I would not want to be a Black male in this community approached by police.
Now, in this letter, in the chief's explanation of her decision, she says that officers, in their thought process on how to arrest Dee were thinking about just their prior experiences with him in the past, as well as his own history. I know we spoke a little bit about that earlier. Are you able to kind of go into that? And in your opinion, does any of that even matter when it came to what happened?
A, I don't think it matters. It's irrelevant. B, I've never known this man to attack or assault police officers. And, one of the standard charges during the protesting was, resisting arrest. And it's I call it the push me, pull me movement, where there was an officer behind him who's pushing him forward. There's an officer in front pushing him back, and it makes him look off balance. And then you could hear the female officer, I think that was the female sergeant, hollering, "Stop resisting, stop resisting." Common LMPD practice. And almost uniformly, at least the protesters that I represented, many of them that were charged with resisting arrest, they were not. They just were not. And I won't plead people to that. I won't allow people to plead guilty to that. It's just, it's ridiculous. And, to say, if we use that, I heard, now I don't know if this is accurate, but I'm assuming this to be accurate, that the chief said something to the effect of, they were trying to, the officers that were on the scene were trying to get his other hand out from under him into handcuffs. So the method of doing that is to beat him in the face, to beat a defenseless, restrained person, you saw it, repeatedly punch this kid in the face. I mean, that's the tactics of probably Russia. I mean, that's not the tactics that should be exercised by law enforcement in the United States of America. And it violates our Constitution, our state laws. It violates his rights as a human being. And to say that that's an accepted method to restrain someone, to the extent he needed to be restrained, which I don't think he did, but that's not an accepted method to restrain someone. They are trained otherwise. And in fact, I mean, if you look at him, I think I submit to you, I can put my hands behind my back and together. He has trouble doing that because he's muscle bound. He's a former football player.
College graduate.
They're trained to deal with that and address that in the academy and in service training. They use 2 sets of handcuffs. It's not that difficult to do. He was not fighting them. He was not resisting. I guarantee you, if this man would have fought those officers, there would have been some injured police officers that night, and there weren't, because he was not fighting them.
Dee, you've just been so emotional during this entire talk. What is just going through your mind as we just talk about this and really, kind of get down to the root of how you're feeling today?
Because I do got a past, but I ain't been in trouble till I moved to Louisville and started protesting. I'm a college graduate. I changed my life. I got a bachelor's in science, played college football. I moved down here for Breonna Taylor. I gave up my football career to come down here and protest for Breonna Taylor and was harassed by LMPD officers, detectives. I was in jail for 40 days, 20 days with no charges. And I'm emotional because, you know, I've been pushing for unity. That's the crazy thing is, you talk to David James, they'll tell you a whole other different story about me. Talk to Bishop Lyons, talk to Reverend Elliott, talk to people that's known out here, the pastors, they will tell you a whole other different story than what Erika Shields. That's why I'm emotional, because my name is being slandered for no reason. Talk to the community. Talk to my daughter. But my name is being slandered. That's why I'm emotional. Because these is real tears. These ain't fake tears. And it hurt. And we say we want unity, but what Louisville is showing here in what Metro is showing here in Louisville is that they don't want unity. They want black people scared of them. Because they can beat you, kill you, and get away with it. That's why I'm emotional. Because I'm scared for my daughter. Do I want her to grow up in Louisville? It's scary for my daughter to grow up here in Louisville. But I'm not the only family that feel that way.
LMPD basically told us today that they did not consider that video to be a part of Breonna Taylor protests. Are you able to clear that up for us?
Everybody knows.
Wait a minute, they said what?
They said that they didn't consider that video was taken during protests for Breonna Taylor.
What do they base that on?
The fact that it didn't happen during the unrest in 2020. The fact that it happened in 2021.
The protesters were still out there in the spring of 21 when it got warm again. And as a matter of fact, the Friday night before he was assaulted on Sunday, there was a group of women down there protesting. Cheyenne was one of them. My 15-year-old daughter at the time was one of them. There were two others or maybe three others. They were in the street marching with signs calling out the names of black people who had been murdered by police around the country subsequent to Breonna Taylor. This had everything to do with Breonna Taylor. And once again, it's LMPD in their own vision of reality and what goes on in this community, which is why they will never bridge the gap and build relations with the black community, because they say stupid things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I saw that one of the letters said that they never spoke with you. They tried to reach out, but I saw your letter saying that you did. You just had stipulations. Can you talk about that?
Yes. The detective that was investigating it's PSU, the Professional Standards Unit, that's policy violations. He actually reached out to Dee, or maybe it was David James, I can't remember. But I told them, have him get in touch with me, and he did. And he said, we want to interview Dee. And I said, well, okay, there's a lawsuit pending. And I said, and in the Courier-Journal, by the way, they reported that I asked for the list of questions. I don't think I asked for a list of questions. I basically want to know the topics that they were going to cover. And I said, here's why. Number one, there's a lawsuit pending. Number two, this was videoed from at least 6, 7, 8 different angles. And I said, what do you want to ask him? If it's like, did you watch Gilligan's Island last night? Yeah. Well, tell me what happened. Watch the show. Watch the rerun. I'm not going to let any client comment on what's happening in a video. The video, we lawyers call that the best evidence rule. The video tells the story. Watch the multiple angle videos. What do you want to ask him? Is that you? And I said, so we'll be happy to meet with you, but I need to know the topics of discussion, and I'm not going to let him editorialize or give opinions on what's happening as he's watching it and as you all are watching it. And I went so far as, because I heard from various people that the chief was putting a narrative out there that that Dee was refusing to come in and talk about it. I wrote the chief a letter, and I said, no, that is not what happened. And the detective said to me, well, we have our policy and we don't do it that way. And I said, I have my policy too, and I filed a lawsuit on behalf client, and I'm not going to let him sit down with investigators without me, number one. Number two, without knowing what you guys are going to ask him. But I told the chief, we will be happy to come in and talk to you. The detective can be there. I'll be there. Dee can be there. I said I'd like David James there because David James, the president of council, is a retired police officer. He knows a little bit about this subject and about what went down. And my opinion, I'm not going to speak for David, but I've spoken to him about this, and he believes what happened here was absolutely wrong and a violation of policy, and that the police officers should be held accountable. So I said, let's have a meeting. Never heard from her. Never heard from her. Never heard back from the detective. Never heard back from her. They never were interested in hearing from us. So that if they're putting a narrative out there that we didn't want to come in and talk to them or that Dee didn't want to talk about it, that's a lie.
What is next?
As far as
You guys, any other course of action regarding this assault on officers? What is next?
Well, as I said, there's a civil lawsuit pending, and we've got depositions coming up. I think some next week. In the case, I'll take Aaron Ambers shortly, and the other officer, and I mean, stand by because I suspect the Justice Department will come out fairly soon with a report and probably with some charges against some other police officers. And I truly hope, now that we have a real Justice Department under President Biden versus the one we had under Trump, that they will charge this officer and numerous other officers with criminal civil rights violations. As far as LMPD or state, I mean, if anybody thinks they're going to charge these officers with state law violations, hell, they murdered Breonna Taylor, and there's not a single charge assigning responsibility for her death arising out of that. And we get a wanton endangerment charge against Hankinson over people in another apartment. I mean, it's just not going to happen here. There's not going to be justice for Breonna Taylor. Well, she ain't ever going to get justice because she's dead. They killed her. But her family's never going to get justice. And the black people of this community are never going to get justice from our state and local officials. It's not going to happen. If we get justice in this town for folks like Dee and other protesters and activists that were assaulted, arrested, etc., it's going to come from the federal government.
And you have faith in the federal government that they will give Dee, they'll give him some type of justice.
Do I have faith in the federal government? I'm not sure I have faith in any government. I have more faith in the federal government, let's put it that way, than I have zero faith in local government, in the local administration, and the local administration of the police department. Our state attorney general, I mean, look at the Breonna Taylor investigation, botched from the get-go. I submit to you that a first-year lawyer could have presented that case against Brett Hankinson better than the prosecutors did out of the Attorney General's office. It didn't look to me like they really wanted to convict anybody on that. So I have hope, let's put it that way. Do I have faith? They've indicted 2 officers so far. One's pleaded guilty. We'll see about the other one. I firmly believe the United States Department of Justice under Attorney General Garland did not come to Louisville, Kentucky to indict 2 police officers over the conduct of this police department in the last 10, 12 years. And they're investigating not just the reaction by LMPD to the protests, but they're investigating a lot of other conduct of the police department in the last so many years. And,
And the city.
Yeah. I mean, and just to give an example of one of the things I hope they look at is, I don't know if y'all remember this, but the Sunday after Tyler Girth was shot to death in the square, LMPD pulled snipers off the roof of the, not the Omni, the Hyatt hotel parking garage. They never publicized it. We found out about it from a blurb on one of the local news stations. I asked about it in a meeting the week of July 4th of 2020. They made me make an open records request to obtain the information. I did ask them at a meeting. It was Friday, the weekend of July 4th, that Friday, we had a meeting with the command staff to talk about communication and the protests. I think you were there. Tara was there. But anyway, I asked them, well, how did you all see the snipers? Oh, the helicopter saw them. That was not true. A citizen saw them. And they yanked 2 white guys off the roof of the Hyatt parking garage. One was 17 years old. The other one was 21. They had long guns and bipods, which are, sniper apparatus. They let them go and gave them a ride to meet their militia buddies up at Shelby and Broadway, 1.5 miles away. Who ever heard of that? Who ever heard of law enforcement doing that? And I have surmised that maybe not command staff of LMPD, but the rank and file, some of them knew about these 3%ers, Proud Boys, whoever, whatever you want to call them, that were here in Louisville, and they weren't up on that rooftop hunting deer. So, and if they'd have spotted 2 black people in a hotel parking garage in July of 2020 with sniper rifles, what do you think would have happened? That they would not have walked off that roof. They'd have been taken off that roof in body bags.
Any final thoughts you guys want to share?
I'd say one more
Please
thing.
do, Cheyenne.
Another thing that makes this really hard is that we don't hate police. Dee doesn't hate police. We want the police to reform. And it's really hard to understand how or why this officer is being protected. If Erika Shields had just come out, or the officer come out and said, I'm sorry this happened to you, Dee, then we would maybe be on a whole nother track, and that would help with the relationship between LMPD and the community, but they chose not to do that. So again, like Dee said, it shows that maybe that's not what they really want.
And I've said this a million times, because all the white people out there are going to say, David Mour hates the police and he's trying to stop the police from protecting us. You know what? I was a police administration major at U of L. I was a small city policeman while I was in undergrad in my first year of law school. My brother's a retired United States Capitol policeman. I was an FLP attorney for the city of Shively for a number of years. At the beginning of my career, I assisted an attorney in my office who was the contract legal advisor for the old Louisville Police Department. I respect the police 100% and back the police 100% when they obey the law and they respect the civil, constitutional, and human rights of everyone of all colors, races, genders, whatever you want to call it. And LMPD in the last 10 years, 12 years, and particularly during the protests of 2020 into today, is none of the above.
Thank you, guys. We appreciate you very much.
Now go back to work.
Appreciate you taking your time.
Thank you, guys.